My son didn't know I spoke French. That morning, as we stepped into the bright apartment on the 12th floor, I kept quiet, pretending I did not understand a single word. Julien was speaking to the seller, a tall, calm man with a polite smile, and I listened from the wall, letting the words float past me. I had learned enough in secret to understand everything he said, and my chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and dread. My name is Talia Kendrick. I am 62 years old. We had been in Portland for a little over a year, and Julien, now 40, had grown accustomed to managing most decisions in our small family. I had followed his lead for years, letting him choose our vacations, our meals, our weekends. It had been easier that way, or so I told myself. But something about the way he talked now, certain that I could not hear, made a familiar weight settle in my stomach. The apartment itself was immaculate, modern, and quiet, but I noticed little of it. My attention was on Julien's tone, the subtle authority he wielded, the way he laughed at things he thought were inconsequential. I clutched my purse a little tighter and let my eyes wander around the room, pretending to examine the hardwood floors and sunlight streaming in through the windows, while my mind replayed phrases I had whispered to myself in French during early morning lessons. I felt the first flicker of something I had not felt in decades, a quiet, simmering awareness that the life I had been living, obedient and small, could change. I would need that awareness very soon, because what I was about to hear would pierce right through the patterns I had clung to for years, forcing me to reckon with Julien and the truths I had been avoiding for decades. I stayed in the shadows, letting Julien's voice carry farther than my own. "Mom, just leave it," he said one afternoon when I suggested a small change to our kitchen setup. I nodded, swallowing the words I had rehearsed. Every suggestion I made, every small preference, was met with a casual dismissal or a sigh. I remember the time I wanted to take a painting class. Why waste time on that? "You'll quit after a month." He had laughed so loud it echoed in the living room, and I didn't speak of it again. I stopped asking. I stopped hoping my voice mattered. Work was no different. My accounting job paid enough for basics. And Julien reminded me constantly that the car, the rent, the bills he handled, all the heavy responsibilities. Evenings followed a predictable rhythm. He would settle in the living room, TV on full volume, while I moved quietly through the apartment, cleaning, cooking, adjusting. If I spoke too long or offered an opinion, I could feel the irritation in his glance, hear it in the inflection of his words. Looking back, it wasn't one harsh sentence or argument that broke me. It was the steady erosion of being unheard, the quiet accumulation of small dismissals. And I stayed, thinking patience might restore balance, thinking love meant trying harder. Each day, I tucked my thoughts away, shrinking just a little more, until I barely recognized myself. Julien's voice filled the room again. "Mom, don't move that there," he said, adjusting the papers on the table without waiting for my answer. I paused, letting my hands hover over the stack I had just organized. Nodding silently, it was always like this. Every detail, no matter how small, had to pass through him first. "Are you sure about these numbers?" he asked later, glancing at my spreadsheets. I nodded, quietly confident in my work. He leaned over, scanning the page. "I think we should double-check them," he added, his tone calm but final. I held my tongue. If I argued, it would feel like defiance. If I stayed silent, I felt myself shrink a little more. He controlled our weekends the same way. "We're leaving for Portland tomorrow. I booked the hotel. Pack light," he said while scrolling through his phone. My suggestion to take a different route was met with a dismissive shake of his head. "This is easier. Trust me," he added, the corners of his mouth twitching with that mix of certainty and impatience I knew too well. Even when he smiled, there was a layer of calculation. He adjusted the thermostat, changed the dinner plans, decided which movie we'd watch, all with a subtle air that my preferences were inconsequential. I moved through the day quietly, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest, the muted frustration that had become a constant companion. It wasn't cruelty, not exactly. It was the quiet, persistent assertion of control, the way he made decisions for us both while leaving me with the illusion of choice. And each time, I reminded myself to breathe, to stay small, to survive another day. I found a small corner of the apartment that felt like it belonged to me alone. My laptop rested on the kitchen counter, the hum of Julienne's television in the living room masking my whispered words. Bonjour, I repeated softly, tracing the letters with my finger. Every syllable was mine, unobserved, unjudged. Julienne wandered in, phone in hand, scanning the morning emails. Mom, make sure the bills are paid before you start messing with your hobbies, he said casually, not noticing the small grin tugging at my lips. I nodded, pretending to busy myself with the stack of papers in front of me. Night after night. I practiced, 15 minutes at first, then 30, and then an hour. I whispered phrases while Julienne concentrated on his shows, sometimes laughing at a joke I didn't hear. Each new word, each new sentence unlocked a small thrill, a reminder that I still had my own mind, my own voice, waiting to be used. The first time I understood a short video without subtitles, I felt a flicker of something I had long forgotten: pride. I tucked my notebook under a pile of blankets when Julienne entered the kitchen. Mom, are you coming to help with dinner? He asked. I smiled faintly, closing the laptop. In a minute, I said, keeping the secret, savoring the private excitement that belonged only to me. No one could diminish this small rebellion. It was mine, a quiet proof that I could still learn, still grow, and still take control of a piece of my life without interference. And with every whispered phrase, I felt the weight of silence on my shoulders lift, just a little. I stayed close to the wall, arms folded, pretending to study the hardwood floors as Julienne spoke with the seller in French. Every word passed over me, and I let the syllables roll silently in my mind, translating them with the quiet precision I had learned over the past weeks. Julienne smiled, leaning in slightly. Elle n'a pas besoin de savoir. C'est moi qui décide, he said. My stomach dropped. My hands tightened into fists. The words hit me like a blow, and for a moment, the apartment, the sun through the windows, everything faded. She doesn't need to know. I am the one deciding. I froze, the sentence echoing in my mind. 15 years of being seen but not heard, of shrinking myself so he could feel bigger, pressed down on me in one instant. I felt the years of quiet compliance, of swallowing my opinions, of pretending I didn't care, all collide into a single cold truth. Julian had never considered me an equal. The seller glanced between us, offering polite smiles, oblivious to the storm building in the corner. Julian laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that carried certainty, control, and the implicit message that I was supposed to be invisible. I clenched my purse tighter, my chest rising with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I could feel my voice gathering, a tremor starting in my throat. He doesn't realize I understand everything. He doesn't know that I have been quietly learning, whispering French at night while he focused on his shows. Thinking he had the upper hand, I stepped closer, not out of confrontation, but of necessity. Julienne, I said, my voice low but steady. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. He had believed he controlled the room, the conversation, and me, but now he realized his assumption was wrong. The apartment grew still around us, filled only with the weight of my realization. My silence had ended the moment I heard him speak. Everything I had tolerated, everything I had hidden, was about to shift. I waited until Julian turned back toward the counter, pretending to check his phone. My heart pounded in my chest. The words I had just heard her doesn't need to know. I am the one deciding still reverberated through me. I stepped closer, my voice firmer than I expected. "Julian," I said, low and steady. Low and... He looked up, eyebrows raised, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "Yes, Mom," he asked, though his tone carried a trace of annoyance. "Did you really just say I don't need to know?" My words hung in the air, calm but sharp. "Did you say that I am not part of the decision?" Julian blinked, a quick, almost guilty movement. I just meant, don't." I interrupted, cutting him off. "I heard everything." He froze. "You understand French?" His voice cracked slightly, disbelief creeping in. "I do," I said quietly, letting the silence press against him. "For years, I've been listening. For years, I've been shrinking, waiting, obeying, thinking that patience and kindness would keep us together." I swallowed, forcing the calm to carry my words. "But your words today, they make clear that my voice never mattered to you." Julian ran a hand through his hair, pacing a little. "Talia, it's not like that. I provide, I manage, you just what?" I demanded. "Decide everything while pretending I am invisible. You make all the choices, and you dismiss my thoughts as if I don't exist." He looked at me, eyes wide, searching for a way to reclaim control. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did," I said firmly. "And this time, I will not stay silent." He paused, the weight of my gaze pinning him. The room felt smaller, charged with years of unspoken frustration now released. I could see the unease, the realization that this mother he thought he understood had finally found her courage. "I can't continue like this," I said, voice steady, measured. "I can't live in a life where my opinions, my decisions, my existence are irrelevant." He took a step back, finally seeing me as more than the quiet, compliant woman he had grown used to. I stood taller than I had in years, the tremor of fear replaced by something stronger, moral clarity and self-respect. After confronting Julian, I knew words alone wouldn't change my life. I needed action. I spent the next morning at the kitchen table, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I called my old friend, Denise, who had worked in real estate for years. "I need guidance," I said. "Not for him, not for anyone else, for me." Denise didn't hesitate. "Talia, start with what you can control: mortgages, ownership, your rights, look at the condo deeds, insurance, everything. Document it." Her tone was calm, deliberate, like she knew the weight I carried. I began by reviewing the paperwork for our current apartment, noting whose name was on each document. Julian assumed I wouldn't pay attention, but I did. Every mortgage payment, every bank statement, every insurance policy was quietly scrutinized. I learned about joint ownership, the nuances of refinancing, and the options available if I wanted to purchase a unit independently. That afternoon, Julian wandered in, phone in hand. "Mom, are you still buried in those papers?" he asked. Casual, but with a faint edge. Sensing something different, I looked up, meeting his gaze evenly. "Yes, it's time I understand the foundations of my own life." He raised an eyebrow. "Found something interesting. I found several ways to make sure I'm protected," I replied, my voice steady. "Ways to ensure that my decisions matter, that my investments matter, that I matter." He said nothing, returning to his phone. But I could feel the shift. For years, he had taken for granted my silence, my compliance. Now, even in these small steps, reviewing documents, making calls, asking questions, I reclaimed pieces of myself. By evening, I had scheduled a meeting with a mortgage advisor and compiled a list of units I could consider. I kept a notebook filled with notes, calculations, and potential strategies. Each page felt heavier with possibility, lighter with hope. Julienne glanced at the notebook once, then looked away. I didn't comment. I had begun the process of building a life solely mine. No one else dictating terms, no one else holding the keys to my choices. The day I signed the papers for my new apartment, I felt a quiet surge of triumph. The keys were mine, not Julian's, not anyone else's. I held them for what felt like a long time, feeling the weight of ownership settle in my hands. "Congratulations, Talia," Denise said over the phone, her voice warm. "This is your life now." Julian noticed the change immediately. "Mom, you bought it." His tone was sharp, tinged with disbelief. "I did," I said, calmly, letting the words linger. "I made the decisions, I arranged the finances, everything." He stared for a moment, then muttered, I didn't think you would." "I didn't think I could either," I admitted, smiling faintly, "until I realized that no one else is responsible for my life but me." The following week, I started the new position at the international firm, managing accounts for branches across Europe. Speaking French in meetings felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had hidden for decades. My colleagues responded to my work, my insights, my decisions not to Julian, not to anyone else. One afternoon, Julian called. "Mom, are you settling in okay?" "Yes," I replied, feeling the calm authority in my voice. "The apartment is mine, the job is mine, and so is the life I'm building." He paused, clearly struggling to place this new Talia. I see." I hung up and leaned back, letting the first real taste of freedom wash over me. No one dictated my schedule. No one judged my choices. No one diminished my presence. I was responsible, fully and entirely, for the shape of my days. That evening, I walked through the apartment slowly, touching the counters, opening the cabinets, imagining dinners, evenings, and quiet mornings for myself. Every small act turning on the water, adjusting the thermostat, arranging my furniture was a declaration. I was here, fully present, fully alive, and fully mine. I met Julian at an evening certification class I had enrolled in to advance my skills, tall, steady-eyed, with a calm presence. He took the seat beside me without hesitation. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, voice polite. "No, go ahead," I said, feeling a flicker of ease. Throughout the class, we exchanged notes quietly, comparing approaches to the exercises. His questions were thoughtful, never condescending. When I struggled with a particular example, he offered guidance with patience. "You might consider structuring it this way," he said, pointing to the page. I nodded, appreciating the subtle encouragement, the lack of judgment that had been absent from my life for so long. After class, we walked to the parking lot together, talking about work, certifications, and the minor frustrations of learning new skills at my age. Julian listened as much as he spoke, and for the first time in years, I felt heard, genuinely. His presence was steady, patient, and respectful. A stark contrast to the constant oversight and control I had experienced from Julian. Weeks passed, and our routine became a quiet companionship. We studied early, stayed late, and shared our progress. But there was no pressure, no expectation beyond mutual support. He never questioned my decisions or minimized my accomplishments. One afternoon, he remarked, "I admire your focus. Talia, Not many commit to this with such determination. Thank you, I said, warmth rising in my chest. It feels good to have someone recognize it without trying to control it. Julian smiled, understanding in his eyes. That simple acknowledgement, free of judgment or command, felt revolutionary. I realized that kindness and respect could reshape the way I connected with others. For the first time, I allowed myself to enjoy someone's company without the lingering tension of compliance or fear. Being around Julian was a gentle reminder that relationships could be nurturing, supportive, and empowering. It gave me the courage to embrace connection while preserving my independence, healing a part of me that had been silenced for decades. I sat at the edge of my sofa, the apartment quiet for the first time in decades. The keys to my own place rested in my hands, and for the first time, the weight felt empowering rather than heavy. Julian's notes lay on the table, his pen still uncapped, reminders of hours spent in shared focus and support. "You're really taking this seriously," he said one evening, handing me a fresh coffee. His tone was gentle, without expectation. "I am," I replied, smiling. For the first time, everything I do matters to me. Julian's absence felt like a relief I hadn't realized I craved. When he called, I answered calmly. "Yes, Julian, I'm managing fine," I said, letting the steadiness in my voice replace the anxiety I had once carried. There was no pleading, no trying to anticipate his moods, just clarity. The new job kept me busy and challenged. I spoke in French confidently during international meetings, shared my analyses without hesitation, and realized that I could finally stand on my own merit. My voice, once silenced and minimized, now held weight and respect. One evening, Julian leaned back in his chair, studying the spreadsheets we had reviewed together. "I admire how far you've come," he said quietly. "Thanks," I said. "I've learned to trust my own judgment, to value my decisions." I reflected on the years of quiet sacrifice, the long stretches of compliance, and the small acts of bravery that led me here. I had confronted disrespect, reclaimed control over my finances, pursued personal growth, and built connections grounded in respect rather than control. As I poured a glass of wine and sat with Julian on the balcony, the city lights stretching before us, I realized something fundamental. I was no longer the woman who had faded into the background. I was fully present, fully independent, fully me. If this story resonates with you, comment, and share your own journey of reclaiming independence.